Welcome back to the channel. Racer X here, and today I'm with my good buddies at Streetside Classics in Lutz, Florida. This is actually their Tampa location, and this is actually one of my favorite dealerships to film at. It's like a Disneyland. If you're an old school muscle kind of person, you like the retro cars, all that kind of stuff, they have basically everything in here. The dealership is just huge, and really anything you could want. If it's old school, they pretty much have it. I'll actually walk in there and show you a couple of really cool things. And today I have a very cool video set up for you. It took me back to my childhood. I'm really eager to show you this car because it's pretty cool. Anyway, guys, if you're new to my channel, please do me a big gigantic favor and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And here we go.
T-minus 15 seconds.
So every time I come in this dealership, they've got a bunch of new cars to look at. So I kind of get excited every time I come in. They've always got these AC Shelby Cobra replicas here. These are kit cars, but expect a review on this here very soon. I cannot wait to drive that. But as you look down the line, as far as you can see, they've got all of these classic cars in here. They actually have some new age stuff as well. So a really good mix, a lot of resto mods, a lot of true classics that have been just restored beautifully. And check this thing out. This thing, this is a really unique car. This is a Malibu. This is technically a 1964 Malibu, but it's got an LS in it. And look how beautiful this is. This is a true resto mod. I mean, look at the intake here. It's got a Willwood braking system on it, which is actually kind of hard to see. It's tucked down in there, but they are definitely there. So you do get your disc brakes there as well. Look at the interior on this. It is gorgeous. And so basically you get all of the really, really nice modern equipment that you would want to make the car fun to drive, and yet you still get that old school look that you just never see on the road anymore. I really like this car. And this is one of hundreds of cars that they have here just like this. And here is the car that I wanted to show you. This is the 1991 Formula Firebird. And if it looks familiar to you, there's probably a reason why. This thing caught my eye when I was walking around their showroom the other day, and I just got to do a little review on this because that basically is the Knight Rider car.
Knight Rider, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist.
Yes, there are some differences. I'll explain them to you, but essentially that is the kit car from Knight Rider. That was a TV show that came out when I was very young, but a very cool car and definitely something worth taking a look at. Now, if you truly consider yourself to be an automotive enthusiast, then you probably know there were a whole bunch of really cool TV shows back in the day, basically glorifying different cars. Like we had the General Lee and the Dukes of Hazzard. I could actually name a whole bunch of them. But this car is no different. That is a very iconic car, a Generation 3 Firebird. Yes, they had the Trans Am. This was actually from a TV show called Knight Rider. Back in 1982, that show came out with David Hasselhoff. And to this day, this car is still really iconic. It's still a good looking car. Let's actually take a closer look at it. The Generation 3 Firebird is a pretty striking car even to this day. Yeah, I know it doesn't look modern, but I think Pontiac did a pretty good job with the design of this car. You can see your fog lights tucked in way down there. Kind of has a menacing, almost eyebrow type look to it. Of course, you do get pop-up headlights with this. Now, they made this car all the way back in 1982 when the show came out for 10 model years until 1992. So this is actually a 91 model. And then, of course, the one in the show was at 1982. This being a formula car, it is a V8 car, a 5-liter V8. They did make a 6-cylinder in this as well. And being that it's a car from the early 80s initially, or the early 90s, if you will, this particular one, they were pretty much slow. Most cars in those days were, but it is a pretty striking looking car. Let's get back here and take a quick look at the rear of this. Now, this, of course, is a convertible. They did make a hardtop in this as well with T-tops, but unmistakably, it is a Firebird. And this car actually sounds pretty good. This is kind of the start of those lights right here. We saw the 98 car come out with that honeycomb look, but this one is kind of a distinctive taillight there as well. Now this particular car does actually have the Trans Am wheels on it, which I think look pretty darn cool. Now on the Knight Rider car, obviously there were a lot of differences, but you know, the wheels on that car were actually all black. So I'll talk a lot about the differences between the movie car, the kit car, and this one. But this is essentially that car. A very striking thing when I see one of these on the road, that is obviously the first thing I think about, is that show Knight Rider. Here's a little glimpse of the interior, which I will show you here in a minute, but I do really like the lines on this car. So here is the power plant in the 1991 Formula Firebird. Yes, it is a V8, but the numbers won't exactly blow your socks off. I mean, I think 170 horsepower is what this put out, somewhere in the mid twos on torque. Obviously, we had carbureted options here, but it is a nice looking engine bay, very clean in this. And by those standards back in the day, like I said, over 30 years ago, this thing was still pretty sweet. Now, one thing that Pontiac was pretty good about was giving you a lot of trim choices in the Firebird. There were actually 4 of them. The base one was a V6 that put out a monstrous 140 horsepower. You had 2 5-liter V8 options. I think one was like 170 in the Formula, like this one. And then, of course, I think you had the Trans Am, that's like those wheels there. And I want to say that one was like 205 horsepower. And then they had the 5.7-liter V8 that put out like 240 horsepower, and that was their GTA Trans Am. So like I said, lots of different options on this particular car. Now I wanted to take a quick second and also mention they do actually have a GTA that just came in at this dealership as well. And I mentioned there are 4 trim levels of the Firebird. Obviously this is kind of the bad daddy from that generation, the GTA. So look at this beautiful car here. This was the highest horsepower offering they had in the Trans Am. You see the wheels are basically exactly the same as the car outside, but this is just a beautiful specimen, very, very clean. Very similar to what I was showing you outside, but of course this is the top level offering. So I thought I would throw that in there for you as well. I wanted to give you a real quick look at the interior of the 91 Firebird. It is pretty rudimentary compared to today's standards, as you would expect. Like I said, this vehicle is over 30 years old, and the kit car that I'm comparing it to is essentially 40 years old. So you can see your door is, well, not a whole lot going on here. You just pull it open and you've got your door locks. Now, one thing that is a little different in this particular car, your window switches are there in the middle. Of course, there is your drive mode selector. That is an automatic. This is a 4-speed automatic. Kind of a rudimentary steering wheel as you would expect, but hey, what can you do? You do see the gauges here. As you would expect, they are analog. And then of course here in the middle, if you want to play your tapes, you've got a place to do that right here. You can play DJ here with these little guys, and of course a few other little controls there for your audio, your climate control, a little bit different way to do that as well. You can see your fan speed and a couple of adjustments there in terms of temperature, so that is kind of different. There's your glove box right there. It is just a pocket. So a little bit different there. And of course you do have cloth seats in this particular one. You've got a little bit of center storage, not a lot. And the floor is actually not very far down. You sit in this car with your legs basically straight out. It's kind of a different way to sit, but the seats in this car are actually in really good shape, despite them being cloth. And it does of course have a back seat, as you can see here. And as you would expect with all the Trans Am, the back seat is pretty small, but not a bad interior at all. Now the Formula Firebird does actually feature a dual exhaust, and actually kind of nice. They don't look too bad at all sticking out of the back of this thing. And of course you do have a trunk back here. Remember, this is the convertible, so the trunk space in this looks a little bit different, but they wanted to have a place for you to basically put your T-tops. Obviously this being a convertible, you wouldn't need that, but not a lot of space in the back of this, but you could definitely put a little bit of stuff back here. Now this sort of begs the question, right? Racer X, why are you showing us a 1991 model when we know that the original kit car was all the way back from 1982? Well, as I mentioned, they made 10 model years of this, and they really didn't change very much. I mean, they basically look the same for 10 years, all through that Generation 3 life cycle. Now, when you compare this to the kit car, there are a lot of differences, as I mentioned. This particular one is a convertible. This 1991 model was actually the first convertible that they had put out in a long time. I believe 1969 was the previous convertible that they had put out there. But some other kind of key facts about this compared to the kit car. We know the kit car basically had lights. Basically, basically, well, like I'm saying, right up here. It had lights in the dash. Now, there are some really interesting things about the movie car. They had a whole bunch of those. Obviously, as you can imagine, they really tore them up when they produced the series. And that's just part of having a television series where you're featuring a car. You've got a hero car. They're always chasing down bad guys. They would really beat the living snot out of these cars. So there are very few remaining kit cars out there. I think there's 4 or 5. Believe it or not, the best one that was at Universal Studios, we saw it on Jay Leno's Garage, was actually, that one was out there for like 10 years. And that was a base model Firebird made to look like a Trans Am. And then, of course, they used several Trans Am cars as well. So this is what the inside of a 91 Formula Firebird actually looks like. It's pretty rudimentary, as I mentioned, and it actually looks not a whole lot at all like the kit car that we saw in the television show. That one actually had a steering wheel a lot like, almost like a Tesla Plaid. I mean, basically like an airplane type steering wheel. All sorts of different gauges and stuff like that that were up here. And I mean, basically it was just a movie prop in that thing. But it is kind of cool to sit in the real thing. So as you can imagine, this particular car pales in comparison to the TV show car, the KIT car. Knight Industries 2000 is what KIT stands for, just in case you were curious. And no, that car did not feature a V8 under the hood like this one. That one had a turbine jet engine in it with turbos. It also had a bunch of other cool stuff like smoke and oil. Of course, it could talk to you. It had autopilot. So the original Tesla autopilot, you know, it's like when you look at a Tesla Plaid, you sort of wonder, like that steering wheel and the autopilot and all that, maybe they got their inspiration from Knight Rider. I don't know, but the Knight Rider car had a bunch of really cool stuff in it. Obviously, most of it fake, but kind of cool to think about. Now, the KIT car in the TV show could do 300 miles an hour with its turbine engine and its turbo boost, something only Bugatti could dream of. Also, it could scan for bad guys and could interactively talk to you and pilot itself. I mean, how cool is that? So let's take it down the road. Now, I've always maintained that the cars, really all through the 80s and into the early 90s, well, they pretty much sucked. I mean, they had like no horsepower. I don't think the designs were particularly good. Then, of course, you got into the late 90s and cars got really good. There were a lot of really cool cars out there between the Viper and the Corvettes got really cool, the C5, the Z06s, all that good stuff. Even the later Trans Ams, the generation after this one, man, I think they just absolutely looked fantastic. But this car, it feels pretty cool to sit in, and I've been driving it for a couple of minutes now, and I can't believe how smooth this thing drives. No, it doesn't feel crazy from a horsepower perspective. I didn't expect that. It's under 200 horsepower, but it still sounds actually pretty good. It surprised me, and I'm amazed for a car that's over 30 years old at how smooth this thing drives. It's not exactly driving like a plow, sort of like I expected. Now, this car is, of course, the 4-speed auto, but I'm not really having any issues with it. The car feels pretty snug. It handles pretty good. I'm actually pleasantly surprised by this. Now, optional was a 5-speed manual. The 5-speed manuals in these, they were not very good. So this was back in the day where the shifters were really, they were just awful. But anyway, this car, I'm enjoying driving this. Like I said, you never see these really on the road anymore. I mean, finding one that is in perfect condition like this one is basically impossible. And I guarantee you, guys of my age or older, when they see one of these, they will know just how iconic it is. When you're behind the wheel of this thing, it really does feel like you're driving a piece of automotive history. And I've been driving it for a little while now. I can't believe how many looks this car gets. It's really surprising to me because I've never really thought of this being quite as striking as some of the other cars out there. You know, like I said, the late model Trans Ams and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, this thing, people just identify with it. And I can't believe how smooth it is. When I reviewed the 98 Trans Am, which was basically in mint condition, I don't think it drove nearly as smooth as this particular car. And yeah, I know it's not a crazy amount of power, but it really makes the power in a very smooth way. It's a very satisfying car to drive. And if I wanted a race car, I would not buy this. But if I wanted to just get a really cool, iconic car to drive on the weekends that's smooth, that you can enjoy and even take the top down, this thing would be pretty sweet. Yeah, I'm definitely digging this little Firebird. I would love to just take this down to the beach and watch everybody stare at it. Unfortunately, I can't. It belongs to the guys at Streetside, so I'm going to go give them their car back. But a huge shout out to those guys for letting me drive and review this. It's been kind of fun. And that is my review of the 1991 Formula Firebird. A very cool car indeed. Yes, I realize performance-wise, it's not exactly going to blow your hair back. It is what it is. I mean, all the cars back from this particular age, none of them had any power to speak of, but still a very cool car, very iconic. And yeah, guys, I know it's not exactly like the car in the TV show, but very similar and still very cool. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and I will catch you on the next one. So until then, Racer X.